Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for letting us explain what this is about, this master type design we are running. Sorry, I will mostly read my text. So the aim of this lecture is to discuss about the questions raised by education in typography. I guess there are quite many educators in here. How you create a new curriculum and how you define yourself, what you consider as best in teaching, and how you relate to other curriculums. So this week, we celebrate the first anniversary of the Master in Type Design of ECAL, Ecole cantonale d'art de Lausanne in Switzerland. It's the only curriculum of that kind in Switzerland. And at this occasion, we set up a trip to New York City, where the 10 second-year students are currently doing a workshop with a graphic design studio, Other Means. We went all the way down from 119th Street down on Broadway, down to downtown Manhattan. And here they are processing the informations. So 1 year is not so long for an education program, but long enough to see what's working, what's not, and what is the core of the teaching, and what could be improved. But to be honest, this master's didn't come out of the blue. From 2009 to 2016, ECAL had a Master in Art Direction program, bringing together a wide range of personalities and talents. But this sometimes made it difficult for applicants to clearly see what was about the program. Because art direction can mean a lot of different things. So the decision in 2015 to split the program in two, a master in photography and a master in type design. That's clear. But yeah, there were existing classes we kept in the new program while slightly modifying them. First, at the very core of a type design program is, for us, graphic design, not type design. We felt the type scene doesn't need more geeky specialists, but rather type directors with a broader view on design. So we are pushing toward the direction of widening the knowledge of students who might end up as pure type designer or develop a larger practice. In the graphic design class, Swiss designer Marie Luza makes the students work on macro typography. Here is a diploma project by Leonardo Azzolini. And micro typography and editing. Here is Yevgen Anfalov's book design on Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's Studio of Electronic Music. Every year we have 6 to 7 workshops of 1 week each, really dealing for most of the part on graphic design. Here's one with art director Richard Turley, who also gave us a nice lecture. Here's another one doing a magazine, so creating a type for the magazine, but not only. It was done with a master in photography, and the magazine was based on the archive of Bianca e Blu, an Italian fashion brand, and with 2 titling display fonts made during the week. Or one of the 2 here. Or this, another graphic design workshop with Corinna Neuenschwander and Simone Kohler about images and text with a font made, numerals made for this purpose, reflecting the change of light in 1 day. Other workshops are dealing with traditional crafts and techniques closer to the usual business of type design curriculums. Here you have Edwin Pickstone giving a letterpress workshop. Here is Reto Moser from Grilli Type Foundry on, it's not Hebraic type design, but display fonts. It's Latin type. I don't know what's written, but it's Latin type. And last one here with stone cutting with Roger Gorando, with some results. Finally, a last series of workshops is deeply technical. Switzerland has a tradition of connecting design and industry, and we don't want to lose this. In that perspective, we try to go deep into softwares and production. Here is Bruno Mag and Michele Patane during a lecture on hinting. So, but let's go back to the regular classes. With François Rapport, here teaching graphic and type design history, the students work on what he called sleeping beauties. That means revivals. He forces them to define themselves in the rich history of typography, not to follow the trend, but understand them and hopefully create them. So that's for one class. Another one, quite different perspective, is brought by Bruno Mag, whose first statement in this introductory class last year was, type designers are not artists, but providers of services, so forget your ego and work in groups. That could be, for some students, quite shocking when you have an art school background. You get pushed out of the ivory tower. And so part of his assignments are on designing a custom font for a fictive company, and making a quote, dealing with deadlines, and sometimes, as clients do in the real life, Bruno changes the brief in the middle of the term. So another class given by Kai Bernau is, he really wanted to, when he joined the team, he wanted to avoid the work division in the creative process, not having type designers here and then giving to graphic designers. His class called Tool Makes Shapes mixes calligraphy with the graphic design. He's not exactly now, but is currently giving the introductory class to first-year students, taking them at nest and probably forcing them to work on RoboFont. That's big things for him. Here, some students at work. In my own class, I conceived it complementary to these inputs. I mostly work on constraint material questions. Here, it was a project for which they had to design a text face in 14 points by hand and in real size. That's 5 millimeters. I don't care how they deal with this, but the original drawings must be by hand and the real size. And in the second semester, we focused on non-Latin scripts, here Cyrillic for the first session, with some help by Maria Doroili and Krista Radoyeva. So during the second year of the program, students developed their own self-initiated projects, including a thesis, followed by Roland Fru here and Wayne Daly, not on the picture. Roland is coming from the art history scene, and Wayne from the graphic design and architecture. None of them are type designers, and that's exactly why we chose to work with them, amongst other reasons. Because writing and talking to a broader audience is not bad when you deal with such a specialized field as typography. Typographers or type designers speaking to type designers, okay, but also to the rest of the world could be nice. After the first year of the program, we thought the need of experimentation and formal thinking was welcomed. So next February, Radim Peshko will complete the team. Here you see him during a workshop he gave on conceiving graphic forms from scratch. And here's, after 3 days, 2 or 3 days, I don't remember, the result of this workshop. So, although the basic structure of the course is defined, many parameters should stay open. We want to keep room for surprise, as when we have one-day guests. This lecture was very nice, with a TrueType hat, by Johannes Breuer and Fabian Harb from Dynamo Type Foundry, or here a lecture with Johan Minet. So we also invite graphic designers, the users of type. John Morgan came, Marie Proya, or Julia Born recently. And we try, as you see here with the Swiss type foundry, to mix international figures and with the Swiss scenes, even if actually less than 20% of the students are Swiss. So, yeah, after this short experience, I think some questions are solved, but the problem when you solve some question is that you just have more questions coming. I will be happy to discuss this with you later today or tomorrow. And as a case study, I would like you to welcome Simon Mager. He is a former student of this. It was a master art direction back then, but he did a diploma in type design, and now he's an assistant to the program. So he will show you a few diploma projects.
Okay, doesn't work.
That's all.
Can you hear me? Ah, yeah, okay. So, okay, my name is Simon Mager. I'm a graphic designer from Germany and currently working as an assistant, as Matthieu just explained. I have the pleasure to introduce you to 3 projects that were created in the transitional period between the master art direction and the master in type design. The first one is from Arve Bartvik. He's a Norwegian student who worked on the mapping of geometric typefaces from the early 20th century. The second one is by Jacopo Azzori. He's an Italian designer who worked on the Elsevier. And the third one is by me. It's, you could say, a hybrid between a research project and a type design project. So let me go to the first one. The starting point from Arvid Bartvik's project was actually the Vogue typeface published by Intertype in 1930. What he found particularly interesting was the fact that you probably all know that in Europe there were a lot of geometric typefaces that were on Vogue, and in the United States they were still missing, they were not produced yet, and the Vogue was trying to fill this gap. And what was interesting about it, it had sort of alternate character sets which allowed to integrate a Kabel-ish typeface, a Futura-ish typeface, and a typeface that mimicked the tempo. So that was one part of his starting point. The other part was Franz von Gier, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong, study on masonry science. And he was a tunnel builder and professor from Bohemia who worked he wanted to categorize these masonry signs by creating 14 different grids and kind of systematize their production. His hypothesis was that they were all created on these grids. So Arve took 20 different typefaces of the early 20th century and tried to map them on a grid which we created. And at first they were kind of like a Brut version of the typeface. What he was interested in is it possible to mimic all these typefaces, kind of ignoring their details in stroke and rationalizing their strokes and just stressing their apparent differences. So he did this with all these different typefaces. Here you can see that sometimes it's maybe just the tail of the Q which changes. He did this with all these 20 typefaces. Then he did digital revival of all these 20 different typefaces, including their characteristics. And then in the very end, he kind of tried to come up with a OpenType hybrid version of, like you could say, an extended Vogue typeface which integrates all these different styles, which then was the typeface called Otto. It comes in 4 weights. I think Otto because of the circle, because it makes sense. Comes in 4 weights with italics and also the Cyrillic version, Cyrillic italic. And I think the most interesting part of this project is not necessarily the typeface as an outcome, but more the research behind it, and also it was an incredible amount of labor that he managed to do in less than a year. The second project is the project by Jacopo Azzori. He was interested in the Elsevier model, and as he explained, he thought that over the course of time, there were certain characteristics of the Elsevier which kind of got forgotten. He was, being Italian, especially interested in the fact that back then, the Elsevier was sort of a column in newspapers which was devoted to culture. And it was also, by all means, maybe a cultural typeface, and he wanted to bring back some of that spirit. So this project is more really like a type design project, maybe a revival project. I'll let you inspect the curves. And he also wanted to have some sort of dynamic, maybe aggressive or sharp look to it. And he had 4 distinct weights. He didn't want to do a wide range of interpolations, maybe like a counter statement to what was talked about earlier. He wanted to have a very concise set and functionality for all these weights. It's maybe more, he as a designer wanted to decide how this typeface can be addressed. Okay, and last project, I'm sorry, I'm rushing kind of through, but that's how it is. Is my project. It was started as a research project on concrete poetry. I guess maybe you're all familiar. It's a poetry form that was came up in the 50s in several countries worldwide. It was a kind of universal poetry movement. And I was especially interested in the links between concrete poetry and graphic design, and in particular between concrete poetry and advertisement language. And I had a case study on one of the fathers of concrete poetry. It was Eugen Gomringer, who did a collaboration with a graphic design studio called ENU Hitstand. And he kind of managed to use concrete poetry as a language to create a corporate identity for a store. But that was not primarily what brought me to the production of a typeface. This was by going through a lot of different archives. I kind of fell in love with the warmth of the typefaces that were produced back then. They used a lot of mimeograph techniques or Xerox techniques. A lot of those poems were distributed in a quite like a lo-fi way. And I kind of had the feeling that most of the typefaces that I use now were kind of had lost this feeling of warmth, maybe. So what I did was I drew a typeface that incorporated some of those features which I liked. It's a Cortat typeface, which borrows some of the proportions from Unica and maybe also inspired by Balance, which you will see here because it has these kind of taperings, which I kind of liked as in the text. They kind of created this kind of friction and warmth. And I'm currently still working on it, and I'm expanding the character sets into 7 weights with italics. And accompanying this project was I used concrete poetry basically as a vehicle to showcase the typeface. It was in the end a publication that used the typeface, showed my research, and also showed different pamphlets or manifestos from concrete poetry, poems and letters, and a lot of archive documents. And it looked like this in the end, and that's basically the end of my talk. Thank you very much.